Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Just conscious that people are still arriving into the session, but I think what we'll do is we'll get going and allow people to join the conversation. My name is Chris Southworth. I'm the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce in the UK. Welcome back to the final day 3 of the C4DTI Digital Trade Conference and Awards. We had an amazing day yesterday, physical day. We had virtual day 1, physical day yesterday, and then we had the Trade Digitalization Awards last night, and we've actually got 2 award winners on the panel, and we've got another recognized individual as well on the panel. So you've got a great lineup today. Yesterday we talked a lot about ports as logistics centers, as communities, as conveners, and important stakeholders in this whole drive to digitalize world trade. We shared all sorts of lessons learned from the marketplace. And then we had a terrific session with Sir Geoffrey Voss, the head of the civil courts here in the UK, on the legal environment. And we did some breakout sessions on training and smart contracts. And then we had the awards in the evening. I think overall, this has been an incredible coalescence of experts and expertise and knowledge and insight. And I really hope that everybody's walking away from this week with a real sense of what's going on. From my perspective, I think it's incredible how far we have come in a year. We're no longer talking about digitalization of trade. We're now doing the digitalization of trade. Today is all about 3 sessions. We're now going to take a deep dive into some of the pilots, some of the projects that have been going on across governments, across industry, across different geographies, and share some of the insight of lessons learned from those experiences, and to give you a snapshot, I hope, of what's in people's minds as we move forward onto the next phases. So I'm delighted to introduce Ben Ramsden, who's Partnership Manager for the digital supply chains at the Digital Catapult. The UK has an ecosystem of catapults, they're called, which are really sort of innovation hubs, really exciting opportunities to bring companies together with government and test and try new ways of driving innovation across the market. The Digital Catapult is the one that we work with the most in this whole digitalization agenda, and Ben is our lead at the Catapult. So it's great to have you with us, Ben. Over to you to run the session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks again for the opportunity to chair this panel today. We have, as Chris said, we've got a really exciting panelists of leaders and award winners from across the supply chain. So delighted to introduce our panel. We have Pankaj Nandavisai, we have Oliver Oram, Jesus Alvarez Pineda, and Leanne Kemp and Justin Simboyski. So we're going to have a really dynamic conversation today about the role of pilots in kind of creating the meeting the needs of industry, and how we can really start to move, to deliver the mission of the ICC around faster, cheaper, and simpler trade. We've heard, as Chris said, lots of work has already been done. Many of the foundations are in place, from legislation coming together to create this kind of regulatory and legal certainty. But really, and then obviously on the technology side, from security protocols and much of the great work that's happening, the business models are clear, it's becoming clearer, the governance, the collaboration, and the patience is starting to come together. So we're really in a very exciting environment now, where we can start to drive some change. So we have a great panel, people from across government, from the regulatory role, government, the supply chain, and financial community, and obviously our technology providers. So I'm going to briefly give everyone a brief introduction, let everybody introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to crack into the debate. So Pankaj, could you give us a minute on who you are?
Sure. I assist Thai Banker Association in the area of trade digitization. So that gives me an opportunity to have been involved with the national projects to digitize trade in Thailand, both domestic trade as well as international trade. Thank you.
Thanks, Pankaj. And Oliver. And you're on mute.
God, I did that, did I? Brilliant. Thanks. Hi, Ben. Hi, fellow panelists. Yeah, my name's Oliver. I'm the founder and CEO at Chainvine. we've been basically working with moving assets across borders for a number of years. Quite recently, we've been working with the United Kingdom on reducing friction in trade, and then into a far bigger project called the Ecosystem of Trust. That's fairly bilateral. So we've been moving wine from Australia, which is quite good, as Leanne will probably attest to, and as far as America and to our nearest neighbours in the EU. So this is moving and it's happening now. Great to be here.
Thanks, Oliver. Jesus.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jesus Alvarez Piñera. I am the head of data at the Food Standards Agency, which, for those who don't know, is a small government department, non-ministerial government department that regulates the food in the UK. So I think our interest is just to facilitate the work for industry and reduce the burden that companies need to undertake when importing foods into the UK.
Thanks, Jesus. And Leanne, over to you.
Thanks, Jesus. And Leanne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne Kemp, the founder and CEO of Everledger. I guess we're best known for our work in diamond traceability from the source of the mine right the way through to the retail network. And today we'll be talking about our work with the Australian government on critical minerals traceability using our platform.
Thanks, Leanne. And Justin.
Oh, hi, Ben. Hello, everybody. So Justin Zimborski, CEO of Melon & Co. As the name suggests, we import a lot of fresh produce, primarily melons, from all over the world, but essentially South America and Europe would be our two biggest export regions. And hopefully I can provide some insight onto the business user case of how we're practically applying the digitalization processes.
Thanks, Justin. That's fantastic. And yes, I didn't mention earlier, but we have two award winners from the awards last night, both Pankaj and Justin, and Oliver, obviously, with special recommendations for his great work as well. So we're in really great company. So jumping into things, we have the title of the panel is obviously we're looking at interoperability pilots and what we can learn from around the world. So to help kick things off, Leanne, I mean, you've as you mentioned, had some really great success in different pilots. Can you talk to us a little bit about really is it about pilots or is there something else?
It's interesting that you raised the word pilots or production. I guess when we think about it from a technology perspective, everything that we build is production and GA ready. And often we're thinking about the tests and trials from a commercial perspective, or if we're aligning into a potential policy lever. And so from a technology perspective, we know that there is readiness and hardening in the core set of protocols. Distributed ledger is well mature now with over a decade of proven use cases around the world. So I guess the question back to you, are you talking about pilots from a commercial perspective, or are you talking about pilots from a technology perspective? Because certainly everything we do is hardened for production and commercial deployment.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. So splitting out whether or not it's the technology we're trying to develop or whether or not it's the kind of engagement of industry around a compelling business case. And in many ways, as we've heard over the last few days, the tech is kind of there. It needs nudging. What really needs is adoption from industry. So could you talk to us about the, so I think it's about both, to answer your question, but we have to be clear about what the challenges are around both of those. So could you talk about the work you've been doing in Australia and how you've kind of addressed both of those challenges in your work today?
You know, it's really interesting. The work that we did with the Australian government under the Critical Minerals Traceability Platform actually came from the distributed ledger or the National Blockchain Roadmap strategy, where arguably a number of regulators, policymakers, even ministers and politicians were trying to wrap their head around what is this thing called the blockchain or a blockchain. And of course, there's always a series of confusions around the connection of blockchain being the engine for cryptocurrency, and there's the highs and lows of the cryptocurrency wave. So our work began off the tail end of the National Blockchain Roadmap strategy, where a series of investments were made by the national government, and we're a three-tier government system in Australia, and it purposed, close to $6 million and looked to understand the deployment of technology. They actually chose two key industry sectors. Firstly, Australia actually broke the prosperity on the back of the sheep. We're well known for our Woolmark brand, but that certainly wasn't an industry that they chose, even though agriculture is a large part of our culture. They chose wine and the confusions and complexity that resides here on excise tax, which of course Oliver would know quite intimately. And the second is critical minerals. The race is on for rare earths. Australia is the largest producer of lithium in the world, and I think we're well endowed in terms of our critical minerals. And so we came to this pilot looking at it from a perspective of distributed ledger technologies, but ultimately what it did was inform policy around the critical minerals industry, the decarbonisation strategy, how we're thinking about being battery passport ready when we think about the exploitation of these critical minerals. And so it was an interesting sort of, I guess a sailor's knot twist from where I was sitting, because we came into this proving up what we thought to be at the time an immaturity in the thinking about distributed ledgers. But what ended up happening was the formation of a fast-moving and matured industry.
Fantastic. So it seems like it was aligning many of the different activities that were going on at the time, from the tech to the industry focus strategy and the broader sustainability agenda. I mean, how did you, when you're going into that, because there you're talking about the technology work, the pilots there, and then also aligning to the needs of industry. I mean, to what extent was it important to kind of really meet the needs of government as a key stakeholder?
I mean, a government was signing the check, and ultimately it was informing policy and informing what potentially could be some of our largest, underlying GDP. So for us, there were 14 participants involved in our platform. That involved everything from small mining companies to large-scale industrialised mining companies, government authorities, and even our national science body, which is CSIRO. Included in that was not just only the extractives for critical minerals itself, but the overlay on water. I mean, when we think about it from an ESG perspective, and given that we're a drought-ridden nation, it's not only about licensing water, it's responsible water. And so we also looked at this from those sort of multi-cross-threaded industries, and what would that mean to large and small participants. And it largely awakened this domestic advanced manufacturing sector that now the race is on when we think about advanced manufacturing. It also helped to rapidly inform what potentially could become a very proud nation brand. I mean, we have the Woolmark brand in Australia, which everyone internationally would know is Australian wool. But why shouldn't we be thinking about traceability as the underpinning of our nation brand? Besides Vegemite, what else are we well known for? Lithium, Australian critical minerals, Australian wine is another one. So nation brand is an absolute driver.
Okay, that's fantastic. So really, by meeting the needs of all of those different stakeholders, you're able to really unlock, the true value that we all see is very real in the use of advanced technologies. And obviously it was great that the government was able to stump up the cash to get things going and moving, I guess, by really having those needs met. So thanks, Leanne. And so Justin, just moving now into kind of industry from your perspective. I mean, Leanne's put some very compelling, reasons for what the stakeholders in Australia benefited. I mean, could you talk a bit about the pilots that you've been doing and how you've kind of looked at business value for you and your stakeholders?
Yeah, sure. I think perhaps to help answer that question, if I just explain a little bit about what I meant when I said that we're a vertically integrated company, because my sector, the fresh produce sector, has gone through quite an evolution of late. I guess we've all seen some challenges with regards to supply chains and shortage of product on retailer shelves. So what we've done in the last couple of years, we've vertically integrated with the world's largest grower of melons. So effectively, I bring in about 85,000 tons a year, which amounts to circa 100 plus containers, 40-foot containers a week. From Brazil, so we farm 30,000 hectares of land in the northeast of Brazil, and we ship refrigerated container cargo from the northeast of Brazil, bring it into either London Gateway or, in the case of Breakbulk, into Dover. Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork that goes with it, right? I mean, I think we all know that, and we all have seen those challenges, particularly during the pandemic, where I guess everybody became a lot more aware about supply chain disruption. So we have been involved in several pilots. Innovate UK's Trusted Bites, where, similar to what Leanne was explaining, we had a number of the actors in the supply chain involved. So that was everybody from hauliers through to importers and exporters, but also academia, which is a really important part of it. So we had the University of Lincoln involved. I'm very grateful for their help, gave some real scrutinisation to the results. We've also been involved in the ecosystem of trust with Oliver, and we've been providing our data, essentially our manifested inventory data, as well as our conditioning data. So more coming from a sort of standards perspective in this piece about traceability, provenance, country of origin, etc. And we've been sharing it with government bodies as well. I have to say HMRC have been really collaborative and really on the front foot with this. So we've been able to do our own customs declarations. We've been doing everything initially in parallel with the paper version, manually inputting data initially, and now increasingly automating that process and drawing it through from source, thereby digitalizing the whole supply chain. So that's involving the exporter, the shipper, ourselves as the importer, and obviously sharing that data through the Blue Ring, contains Blue Ring platform with the government departments. And it's worked really well for us. I mean, when I was describing the evolution in our industry, we've had to obviously become a lot more productive. I think we're all very aware of inflation, particularly in food. Our supermarket retailers want to work more directly so that they've got that food security and provenance piece, as well as putting best foot forward from a commercial perspective, getting most bang for their buck. And as a result, I'm used to working in companies that have several hundred people. Mellon & Co. only currently has 20 people, but each person is effectively responsible for over 4,000 tons, I think it is, 4,250 tons I worked out earlier on, and about 3.5 million sterling per person. And with those sort of productivity levels, I think to maintain that momentum, it's essential that we adopt the new technology. And we're very happy to share our data. That's been our experience. It's created greater efficiencies for us. I hope in the fullness of time, as you say, we will genuinely reduce that friction at the borders, make best use of our existing border resources. I'm obviously involved in a very short shelf life product. I've only it takes 2 weeks to ship the fresh produce from somewhere like Brazil. I have to give the consumer 7 days shelf life as a minimum. So you can imagine time spent with goods languishing at ports, outside of the inevitable weather delays or whatever else is going on in the world. It's really essential that we move lots of information around really quickly. And I think in any other walk of life, it would just be assumed that we would do that digitally. I'm absolutely convinced that my children and certainly my grandchildren are not going to have to cope with the levels of paperwork that I have, and we need to make it as accessible as possible, but without dumbing down standards. In fact, I see this as part of raising the standards. So they've been some of my experiences, but certainly not without challenges.
Absolutely, but I mean, it sounds absolutely phenomenal in terms of the impact that it's had on your business. I mean, you're talking about the 20 staff with 3.5 million revenue per person and over 4,000 metric tons to each person. I think a lot of businesses would be in awe of that and would love to be able to embrace that. I mean, I guess from what you're saying, then it's helped the data or the pilots that you've been doing. Obviously, haven't stayed as pilots; they've very much gone into your business and they've become kind of production solutions. To what extent has this enabled you to be more kind of have access to better data and to be more proactive about how you're using data and running the business?
Yeah, well, I think I've been very fortunate in so much that because of the vertical integration, I've been able to have a direct influence on the exporter data as well, in terms of being able to use Blue Ring, plug it into our various ERP systems. I've found everybody to be very engaging, and it's allowed me to really make best use of that data. When I talk about challenges, I have to say some of my team initially were a bit fearful, although after I'd explained that essentially we've been doing this work for the sort of 25 years plus that I've been involved in the industry, we just almost haven't realized it. We've been providing all that data manually. It's just this fear about pressing the button and taking responsibility for submitting the data yourself. But effectively, you've always been responsible for doing that. And I think once you get your head around that, it's you remove that fear factor. Yeah. But I think to more directly answer your question, I see a key part of this is auditing. I live in a world where I spend an awful lot of money on an awful lot of audits. In fact, I have one today with a fairly major, well-known high street supermarket. Has some initials beginning with J, so I'm sure you can work out who that is. But everybody wants a snapshot of where we're up to, and I just see massive benefits in sharing all of the data all of the time, and letting all of the relevant bodies scrutinizing it. And I think that the work that we're about to do with our next project that we're involved in with Digital Catapult with regards to the data harvest testbed will take it further again, and we'll be hopefully using retail data to help minimize food waste. And I think to be able to use this data to also predict consumer demand and reduce waste is something that we should all, as custodians of the same planet, Mother Earth, embrace massively. So, that's my opinion on it all.
Thanks, Justin. That's super. That's really powerful. Again, I think just in terms of getting all of the stakeholders collaborating together towards a common goal, and then really unleashing the power that data can have on your business and for those around you. And thanks also for the name check about the project we're just about to be kicking off. And again, I mean, I've worked with factories in the past that had 150 audits a year, and many of the questions are the same, right? So the pressure on factories around audit and compliance is significant, and for many valid reasons. But there's a lot of innovation that's happening in the space of regulation and compliance, and who better to talk to us about that than Jesus? So, Jesus, in terms of the work that you've been doing, obviously you've had a really compelling case from Justin there around the role of data in improving compliance and the impact that has on business. I mean, what could you talk to us about some of the work that you've been doing in that regard?
Yes, thanks, Ben. I fully agree with what Justin was saying about the added value. I think we have recognized from several years ago that the value, we have recognized the value of standardized and digital records. So starting in 2019, we ran a couple of pilots using blockchain. And one of them was for the collection and communication of inspection results of carcasses, and it showed that we could create a process where the incorporation of data into the system didn't have to be manual, the checks didn't have to be manual, and the reporting was much more granular. It allowed us to look at data by food business operator, by day, and by animal, and it also allowed it had inputted into the system. Previously, the system that we were using was very manual. It contained a lot of errors, and it only showed aggregated data. So it provided a small, not much visibility over the system. And the other pilot we did was for the export certificate, specifically with pork being sent to China. And again, it just facilitated the role of the official veterinaries and kind of validated the data. We did that pilot with Cranswick. So it reduced the manual data entry, and it was just it allowed us to do an audit trail in a much faster way. So I agree fully with what Leanne was saying in relation to the value of the pilot. So the benefits of those pilots were that they show that government and industry could come together to share data for a common benefit. Everybody benefited from it. And also it kind of show that there were some issues, some challenges with the data quality and the data standards. So and also with the lack of a legal framework to share data across multiple parties. So you could share down the food supply chain up and down one, but when you have so many players in the food supply chain, how do you ensure that you can effectively and securely share that information? Since then, we have been focusing more, instead of doing more pilots, we have been working on interoperability and also in exploring the legal instrumentation to help with multi-party information sharing. And we have collaborated with you with Digital Catapult in some of those projects to evaluate the value of data trusts, for example. In terms of the pilots, what we call the ecosystem of trust pilots that are being run by Cabinet Office and where Justin's organization is an active participant, I think they help us to explore and to test the governance and the technical arrangements that are necessary for tapping into information that is already available across distributed systems in the supply chain. And I think that is very of great value to government, because we can couple that very granular information in a specific, commodity journey from, let's say, Brazil to the UK, and the information is very granular. We have the participants are able to provide a lot of detail, and we can couple that with other sources of information. Some of them are openly available. That will give us greater insight into traceability and also targeted interventions. So, for example, if we have all that detail about a commodity coming from Brazil into the UK, we can also look at potential risk sources like food alerts and that type of thing that's being reported from across the world, and inform the borders in, well, this particular commodity is involved in a current incident in some other country. So you shouldn't reject it, but you should look into it with a little bit more detail, for example. And I think that's where, bringing those two things together, which is challenging, because when we talk about trade, we normally talk about commodity codes, but when we talk about food risks, we talk about lettuce, we talk about something that is more descriptive. So we will need to buy some kind of ontology to link those relevant data sets together. And again, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning during my introduction, I think we are very keen on reusing information that is what is feasible, and also in reducing the burden on industry. So if someone is collecting the data, we should at all costs try to avoid duplications.
Yeah. That's really helpful.
It's really helpful.
Bit of an echo on your thing. So, really helpful, I think, in terms of like the approach to governance and ontologies. These are kind of fundamentals that are almost like enabling capabilities for any kind of effective collaboration. So that's fascinating. And within this, I guess this access to data both helps you as a regulator to perform your functions more effectively, but also it has a knock-on to industry. And we talked a lot yesterday about the role of corporates in innovation and the role of SMEs. When you look at a supply chain, I mean, how do you balance the needs of the roles of corporates and SMEs?
Well, that's a tricky question. I think I think some of the participants in the ecosystem of pilots are not corporate companies. I think some of them are SMEs, so they have a voice. So I think we try to be inclusive in that kind of experiment. Yeah, obviously, big corporations have more resources and more power, so their voice can be stronger. But I think we try to be fair when listening to everybody. At the moment, I mean, we're running 6 pilots, so it's not representative. They are examples of specific food supply chains as well. So it's not everything is not comprehensive, but we just need to demonstrate the value of this type of approach, and hopefully once people buy into it, we can start expanding it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's
fantastic.
And I think that's really in terms of driving the innovation in the kind of specific pilot areas that are the quick wins, or the more systemic areas like you mentioned around governance and ontologies and so on, which underpin all of the work, but then really helping to share those benefits with others across the full ecosystem. So food obviously is a fundamental, and there is a saying that food without wine is like a day without sunshine. So Oliver, are there any good parallels between the work that Jesus has talked about with food with some of the work that you might have been doing with wine?
Yeah, I think in fairness to Jesus and to what Justin said about HMRC, we've worked with both HMRC and the Food Standards Agency. So we're working with the tax, and we're working with those who keep us safe from what we're eating and drinking. I want to show you something. Can you see that?
Yes.
That's a pile of paperwork for 2 consolidated containers coming into the United Kingdom around about last year. It's half a tree trunk. Now, if anyone likes the Amazon rainforest, you better start moving quickly, because of we're absolutely murdering it to move goods. And it's some sort of prehistoric event where we feel that paper gives us more assurance, which is absolutely a load of rubbish. Imagine FSA and HMRC both looking at that stack of paperwork. Who's going to look at it first? Who gets the priority? And how long is it going to take? Now, what we've been working with in government is actually saying you don't need a lot of data. The producers, such as Justin, have that data in their sets. Can we interrogate them quicker? Can we funnel the data quicker? Can we get it to the right person at the right time? Can we actually get rid of something called delays, which is money, money, money? And when we're building these sort of value chains and networks, there's a business model here, right? Because if the first mover doesn't generally, as somebody said yesterday, win, but actually all movers win. And it's in getting that done that we've worked with the government on the ecosystem of trust. I made a couple of other notes here. You think about the actual cost of this to everyone. In sort of the food drinks industry, operating costs can be up to £100 million a week on delays that can get compounded. Now, for a larger company to find the money to cover their operating costs on delays, it's not a problem. For an SME, it might be the decision to do business or not do business. That's the real situation at the moment, and that is that's what's costing us, and that is totally and easily able to do without actually changing loads of policy. I think it's absolutely bloody ridiculous that we still use paperwork. I think one of the interesting facts, I've been involved in this a long time, friends on the Italian government would say, but Oliver, we have the best wine certification in the world. I would say to them, how many Italians can you fly per bottle of wine? Because you're the only guys who understand your certification, unfortunately. We don't get it. It's like sending a £5 note or a $5 note abroad. Unless you are a user of that currency, you will not understand the paperwork. And it's the simplicity of what we're doing. The actual data is far better and far simpler for international users to understand. And just to go into a comment that was made yesterday, actually, and I think we touched upon it just now about corporates and SMEs. 3 of the platforms, as far as I'm concerned, in the ecosystem of trust, deliberately focused on SMEs. And I think Justin's involved with one of them. You've got Alex at Contained.io and Blue Ring, and myself at Chainvine, who, when we build our systems, was said we have to include the SMEs. That's the only scalable rationale for doing this, because of the corporates could just go and build their own platform if they want, really. But you need to address the 60 to 50% of economics that is not addressed. So the SMEs are covered within the ecosystem of trust and what we've been doing. We've just found numbers, and the numbers are basically move the data. There's £15 billion of paperwork moving around the EU still. Move it to paper, get rid of 50% of that. Give some money back to the farmers, producers. And this is where it goes sort of beyond that technology speech, and actually goes, here's the real value of what we're doing. So there's that. And then I'll just say to my fellow colleagues and associates in technology, make it as simple as the Netflix of grapes.
The Netflix of grapes, excellent. Good punchline there, Oliver. I think obviously the critical point here is that using advanced digital technologies, it can unlock considerable value across supply chains, take out a huge amount of waste, and done in the right way, could almost fund a lot of the what people talk about in terms of the twin transition that is so required to build sustainable sustainability into the ways that we work and build the resilient sort of supply chains that we need. And so thanks, Oliver. That was a super compelling, I think, demonstration of some of the value that you've been starting to see in the pilots, both for corporates and for the SMEs. And obviously we've got some great numbers so far around benefits of the pilots that they can deliver across both food and wine and obviously diamonds and critical minerals. When we look at obviously in supply chains, the flows of materials, information, and money. Money is obviously a critical component. And so, Pankaj, if you could, given the role of finance in supply chains and in the pilots that we've been talking about, could you explain a little bit about the work that you've been doing in Thailand and how this has started to realize value for different stakeholders?
Right, thank Ben. But first of all, I have to say that our pilots wasn't involved about moving money. So we completed the POC and pilot to facilitate sending and receiving of electronic documents for along the import-export process for B2B flows between the two trade corridors, so Thailand, Japan, and Thailand, Singapore. And this project is under ASEAN and APEC Regional Digital Trade Connectivity. So we did this by connecting the platform to platform. So for Thailand, Japan, we connect our Thailand National Digital Trade Platform, we call it NDTP Thailand, that we built with trade walls. And then for Thailand, Singapore, we connected NDTP with NTP of Singapore. So I'll focus, I'll share a little bit more. I'll focus about Thailand, Japan, because we did work on the real electronic document, and we're going to talk about interoperability later, right? So for Thailand, Japan, we did 3 shipments. It's actually petrochemical and frozen seafood, and that we ran the proof of concept pilot, right? So exporter importer in Thailand, and their counterparties in Japan, they send and receive electronic purchase order, electronic invoice, and electronic packing list. And then the rest of other accompanying export documents were actually sent by PDF. So that was tested in our proof of concept pilot. And this is practically an open account collection. So sending documents to collect the payment, right? So while we're working, we also attempted to include also the electronic bill of lading. So we, Trade Trust and NDTP, we collaborated, we talked to TradeLens since early last year, trying to see how we can incorporate EBL as well. But the solution then didn't really deliver the requirement. So we decided to remove that out of scope. So lastly, another element that really linked to banks is because there's a flow of documents through NDTP and trade walls, right? So we said that we want to test also the authenticity of the document, right? So we connect NDTP with our existing platform in Thailand, and it's called Trade Document Registry, TDR. TDR is a platform that up and running since February last year that help bank to check double financing, to detect double financing. So that's up and running. 8 banks participated in that. We detected, some transaction that helped bank in getting into an NPL or double financing. So we connected that with NDTP just to test, to check the authentication of the documents, whether there's a commercial documents flow or not, right? So, and then we respond back to the bank through TDR. So that's what we did. So for Thailand, we built Thailand NDTP since early last year, and the POC and pilot on the 2 corridors were completed in October last year.
Oh. I mean, it's amazing the level of collaboration that must have taken, and the full system that you're getting together in the room. I mean, what were the kind of key value drivers that kind of came to the fore in terms of getting everybody together?
I think everyone I'll talk about Thailand, right? So in the working project, we got all the stakeholders involved. So they're representative from exporters, importers, banks, logistic providers, and even the customs, because they actually they run the national single window, right? The B2G and G2G. So I think everybody really feel the need that we need it's so inefficient, right? So we really need to reduce the inefficiency, get rid of paper, and the technology is there. We've been actually trying this for so many years. And I think for Thailand, we all say that Thailand cannot fall behind. We can just really deal with paper while everybody else really move already on digital, right? So I think that's one. And we talk a lot about, so that's efficiency improvement, and we talk a lot, we talk about SME, right, just now. So really the topic that comes up a lot, discussion that comes up a lot is how do we help SME to have better access to financing? So that is a driver as well. So with electronic documents, know it's real, know who issued it. So hopefully banks will be more comfortable actually lending.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. It's driving efficiency, moving away from paper to kind of digital processes, and then the value that drives in terms of additional services that could be delivered in terms of finance, potentially also insurance, and as we've heard already around the cost of audit and compliance could be significantly changed. I'm aware of our timing, and I've seen that there's lots of questions coming through on the chat. So just going to take off a few of those. So we've heard from Javier about, it would be interesting to hear about how projects deal with entry points of goods into the system, where some form of check or validation has to be made. So the kind of connection with the real world. Obviously, this is significant challenge area. How are we actually validating what is coming in to be correct, and any claims made on that? So Leanne, could you talk to us about the work that you've done on that space?
Yeah, sure. So I guess in the diamonds is the perfect use case because every diamond is unique by its very nature. It's like a snowflake, and we're able to get a physical fingerprint of that diamond. The industry has been well pronounced in terms of its technology and the connection of those devices across that supply chain. And it's hyper consolidated both geographically as well as within certain types of identification machines. So we do connect across that pipeline in an IoT type environment. And then, of course, there's quite strict laboratories. So certainly in a certified sense, diamonds that cross borders must have a Kimberley certificate. Diamonds that are sold within regions of the world will also have polish certification, where laboratories then validate that diamond to provide its grading. So there's a good physical to digital connection in that sense. And we do have sort of trust proxies, I guess you could call it, where industry enables that sort of forensic science view of the item. Critical minerals, very different. We've got a whole bunch of different issues there. There's no such thing as a persistent identity in critical minerals. There is no tracer that you could enable, whether it be isotope or what have you, that would withstand the refinery process. And so you must have this sort of trusted chain of custody event handling, which is why, you know, particularly in, say, gold as an example, you have LBMA standards on refineries, and they're driven by compliance, sort of driven trust certification. So there isn't one way each and every single supply chain could enable that to solve for that garbage in and garbage out. But certainly some objects, diamonds, have that forensic marker that we can actually enable. And a diamond is serialized, no different to a number plate on a car. And so you're able to get that microscopic serial number as well as this microscopic QR code.
Fantastic. I mean, that is a really important point. I think it very much depends on the different sector and depends on the characteristics of the item that's flowing through the system, obviously. And I think what you're saying in terms of critical minerals, that would probably carry through into food and drink and other areas where the kind of the makeup of the element actually changes as the manufacturing process shifts things. There was another question around that links back into food. So Jesus, it would be great to know from your perspective, you know, if you could build on what Leanne said, but also whether you can quantify the efficiency gains that are realized through pilot, adoption by businesses for these solutions.
Yeah, it is a little bit early to do that. I think the pilots are in the first stage. We have a complicated validation process. So there are 3 tranches to evaluate the value of the pilots, and we are finalizing the last one. So I think we'll be able to say something more definite in a few weeks. I think the government, the wider government, this is not the FSA, but we are participants, is trying to implement a system to facilitate the use of digital records. And we have all heard about the single trade window and the border target operating model, which hopefully will able to treat commodities according to the risk they carry instead of just having like a blank sheet of controls. And things like the trusted trader scheme. So hopefully the value of the pilots will be that these companies are able to provide reliable, validated, and I go back to the point of validating the data at the entry. That's essential. But if they are able to provide that validation and that additional detail that will allow us to undertake traceability exercises when needed, I think that would be a clear value for everybody involved, and it will hopefully reduce the paperwork that we have been discussing.
Absolutely, leaning into efficiency gains and helping companies with finance. Ultimately, it's around locking in that business case that Justin so clearly expressed at the beginning. Just on that, we're kind of running towards the end, so I just want to kind of ask this final question, which we've had a really great discussion here about many of the learnings from different programs across the different, many different contexts and many different geographies. And it's very, we're very lucky to have such well-experienced people in this space. And obviously with the questions coming in, there's a lot of interest in things like case studies and so on. But, for everybody who's been involved in this, I mean, one of the things is, what would, if you could do it all again, what would be the one thing you'll do differently? So Pankaj, could I ask you that question first?
Yeah, sure. So the one thing, I think first a challenge that we did actually trying to map the data flow, the data elements is really complex, take a lot of time, right? So, and end up actually we had to just follow TradeWall's structured data format. And that ends up that we didn't really deliver what's required by the Thai exporter importers. That will be worked out actually in the next phase towards commercialization. So if I were to just go back and do it again, I would say, okay, let's really engage more of really the exporter and the importer on both ends. We did involve on this side, but we need to actually involve on both ends and really understand them and just really facilitate them, and so that we can get the electronic document through.
Great. Well, fantastic. I mean, it sounds like you already had amazing engagement from stakeholders, but getting even more sounds brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I guess you can never have enough. Leanne, what about yourself? What would you do differently?
For me, I think we were definitely well ahead of the time in terms of the maturity of distributed ledger technologies, and then the inflection point of policy where it's starting to mandate traceability standards. There's certain world events, particularly in the diamond industry, like Russian sanctions under the OFAC measures that are now causing traceability to be considered as a remedy, I guess, to understand the origin of goods. No one would have foreseen that acceleration event. So for me, I think understanding the timing and then really being articulated in the alignment of value and values creation in a supply chain is where the acceleration or the adoption point begins. The conversation's changed, which someone said to me simply that that's when scale occurs, is when people start to talk differently about what is needed. And I guess many supply chains, for various different reasons, this is a need rather than a desire.
Fantastic. Okay, that's really, really powerful. Justin, from your side, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think that naturally there is a general fear of failure in life and certainly in business, and I think I'd have been less patient. I think I've been too patient. because I think I was fearful of failing. And now, obviously, with the sort of success we've all enjoyed together, and with the benefit of hindsight, it's obvious that I should have, tried to increase the momentum and in this direction of travel at an earlier stage. I want to unlock the forecast 10 to 15% margin enhancement on my bottom line and pass some of it on to my customers and therefore the consumers. And I think that's the prize here. And I think we've all proven that we can collaborate. I think there's an absolute cast iron business case for this, and we need to get the message out there. And as Oliver sort of alluded to, we quite frankly need to get on with it. That's the view of business as far as I'm concerned.
Fantastic. Let's just get on with it. So we've got 30 seconds each. Sorry, Jesus, what would be your thing you want to do again?
Yeah, I think we never had a real opportunity to do some kind of blue sky thinking. So I think we have been forced to react to events, and EU exit being a big one. So I think again, we never had the opportunity to just really join forces with industry and try to make the process of importing food, in this case, easier, while maintaining the assurance that UK consumers deserve in terms of safety and authenticity. So yeah, and I think also there is a need for a cultural change. I think we have been focusing too much on raw data, and I think we just need to move towards signals. When something goes wrong, we want to know, but we don't need to know about every single transaction. That's a little bit my personal opinion. So I think we need to reduce our digital footprint a little bit.
Yeah, and there could be a whole panel. But thank you. That's really, really powerful. And then Oliver, just last.
Right. Yeah, really easy actually. We've been engaged with FSA and HMRC for about 4 years. So I'd probably give you all a scorecard and say, how much did you understand this year to the next year, so we can actually move quicker. And in fairness, there are some extremely forward thinkers in the FSA, DEFRA and HMRC, but it's very hard to join 27 different ministries of the United Kingdom to understand one single alignment. So what I would say is take the digital out of media and culture and create a digital department or a digital ministry and really get on with this, because if this is not like buying a bank over a weekend, it's actually your future and it's your border. So do it now, not tomorrow. That's it.
Thank you so much. Well, Chris, I'll hand over to you, but I think it's clear. The message is, let's get on and do it. We've proven what needs to happen. And what better place to do it than with everybody here on this group. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope it's been a great discussion and look forward to continuing it on in the day-to-day work that we do.
Yeah, just a brilliant comment there. It's just excellent, inspiring session. I was just going to say exactly that. Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you to the panelists. I'm coming away with lots of thoughts here. That point around data, signals, not data, is exactly the same conversation we're having with the finance industry around fraud, actually. There are much simpler ways of doing this, where we don't have to have mountains of data. We just need to be able to talk to each other between tax offices, customs offices, finance institutions. It's quite straightforward. It's not rocket science, actually. So I think that's one thought. In terms of governments, and interesting, this comes up all the time in every country. We have this conversation around government. The good news in the UK is we do have the Department for Digital Science, Innovation and Technology, it's called now, but that's actually got the Digital Trade Policy Unit inside. Johnny Martin was there with us yesterday. But I think it's bigger than that, because in your sort of ecosystem, we were talking about this in Thailand as well, and Singapore as well, where they actually have a specific agencies. That's quite an interesting approach. The ETDA in Thailand, IMDA in Singapore. So that's kind of an interesting approach to go with. But there's a team in Geneva working at the WTO. So they're building the global rule book on e-commerce, it's called, but that's digital trade. That's an important unit, but it's not necessarily based in your national capital, but we've all got one, a mission in Geneva. Connecting that to your digital department or agency in your national capital, that's really important. Having an industry body that's a sort of convener like the C4DTI that's connected to the likes of Ben and everyone else in the industry ecosystem, that's really important. And then we have a what's called a digital trade network in Singapore. That's an interesting team. In fact, I think that's one of the best teams in the UK government under the leadership of Natalie Black, which is then working with the ASEAN, APEC regions, who are absolutely 100% understanding all of this. If you combine those sort of four legs of the chair, you've got a really top class kind of unit. And then, of course, you've got Department for Trade, I shouldn't ignore, on trade agreements and trade corridors and digital economy agreements. If we could sort of replicate and grow, there's a whole session there, I think, to discuss about other governments. How can we sort of almost build a model best practice to drive digital trade and digital trade best practice in governments, never mind the private sector, but it's kind of an interesting, this idea of public-private partnership and cross-government working. Really, really interesting. Hey, look, that was a fantastic session. There's so much. I definitely think we need to build a case study report, because it's, what we've just heard now, we're going to hear again in the next session, is absolute gold dust. Yesterday, we were talking about how do we educate the market? How do we get these messages out? Well, you just shared an absolute encyclopedia of data and in the chat room. You know, we need to put that together, don't we? And then actually just share that, when we could do that through the Digital Standards Initiative. There's a repository, everybody can see it. And then we'll probably accelerate and scale this whole effort up tremendously. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks to our audience as well. We're now got a bit of a break, and then we're on to another session. We're looking specifically at the UK-Singapore corridor on that digital economy agreement, what's going on there on the back of this session. That starts at 12 o'clock British Standard Time. So we look forward to seeing you all back for that session too. But brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks so much. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.